Hey, welcome back to this video here in the LTCC Teaching and Learning onboarding experience focusing on the basics track. And today we're looking at some class techniques. And by class techniques, I'm really talking about pedagogical approaches that might be useful for you in your class, regardless of the discipline that you teach. Keep in mind that pedagogical techniques vary with the modality. So if I'm teaching in a face-to-face format versus enhanced correspondence of ISP, Incarcerated Student Program, or the distance format of DE education through Canvas, the techniques that I use are going to differ. Hopefully there is some similar foundation of all those techniques in terms of focusing on student success and comprehension, but there are differences that we have to acknowledge. At the same time, I feel like it's both a con and a pro in this case. The pro of this is you can adapt a lot of the techniques that you used in a face-to-face class for DE and vice versa. So if you think of those three classes as a matrix, you could almost draw some of those techniques out and say, well, maybe I can't do a lab experiment in DE that I do in face-to-face, but if I'm teaching a concept in sociology, there are ways to do that in any of those modalities. So we can certainly think about adaptation as might be appropriate to taking a type of approach or pedagogical technique from one class in one mode to another class in another mode. Here are just some ideas out there. Again, I can't cover everything. There are hundreds of examples. So what are some techniques you can do or use? You can do group work in your class. You can do structured or unstructured debates. You can do final projects or even portfolios. You can do intermedia, and intermedia refers to sort of combining media from different sources. You could do something with video, something on paper that you construct, even cut out of paper. You could do boards, presentation boards on campus. I used to do poster sessions years ago in the commons at the college, which I found fairly useful. You can also do projects of various sorts. They could be group projects, individual projects. They could be creating something. They could be giving a presentation at the end of that project phase. You could do experiments, of course, in the natural sciences. You could create worksheets, maybe in accounting class. You work through a budget of some sort. You could do physical work. If you're teaching in the arts, there's a lot of 2D, 3D physicality to the pedagogy. So of course, you're constantly probably operating in that mode of space and physicality. Of course, there's media. We in smart classrooms nowadays can project media, show media of various sources. A lot of it is freely available. So that's a very powerful way to connect with students, regardless of the modality. We can also do, of course, various writing projects, ranging from papers to 1-minute papers in classes and so forth. We can do demonstrations. Years ago in an archaeology class, we had a fire-making demonstration and the students learned about that. It's like a more hands-on pedagogy than an abstract theoretical pedagogy that's focused on, sort of passive learning versus active learning. If you're in wilderness education, everything's practically a demo, right? There's some safety stuff, but when you go out like Clinton does and others in wilderness and you train, avalanche training, you're going to have your safety and your papers and all the stuff you need to know from procedures, but you need to actually be in the snow and experience escaping and getting out and rescuing someone and so forth. So demos are really important in so many fields. And then, of course, I mentioned earlier presentations. Not an exhaustive list, but a list of possible techniques that you could use in a class. I've said in a lot of other videos that you should often try to mix up those different approaches. If you just use one form of learning, students can grow tired of that learning because, like all of us, we grow bored with one mode, we want a different mode. So think of mixing things up in a class. Another tip is look out for pedagogical resources on the internet and in publications or industry journals. So as you're going to conferences, as you read about an article online, look out for other folks in the industry who are doing things in your field and take some of their ideas and share some ideas. A lot of great open resources for pedagogical techniques out there. This is a very important tip. Not every technique will work the first time. I've done this before where I try something new, I spend hours on that technique, and then it just kind of bombs, and maybe I never use it again. But I try it out, it doesn't work, I make some mental notes or real notes on my phone, I type those out, and I say, the next time I come back, I'm gonna do these 3 things different. I try it again, I adapt it, repetition. So it's really like a process of remaking where you're constantly trying new things, adapting it, and then hopefully it works better the next time. As I always say, lean on your fellow faculty for advice in terms of teaching approaches. If you're onboarding in world languages, it's really important that you reach out to Kata and Sarah, the full-time faculty, the other part-time faculty in the program, because they've used some techniques already that are probably going to make your life so much easier when you go about teaching a class. For example, they use a Marco Polo app that allows them to do some stuff with comprehension of language and repeating it back in video and so forth. So a lot of opportunities there to reach out and network with your fellow faculty. And by all means, as I always say, with your pedagogy and class techniques, be creative, because creativity, I think, is where we could really shine as faculty, and also where students can have the most meaningful connections to us as they're more immersed and engaged in our classroom settings, and hopefully that relates to better comprehension and learning in that same classroom.